Okay. So I've been following the Washington Wizards for as long as I can remember, probably since I was 5 and I saw my first game. But I would like to ask you if you've ever had something that was ripped away from you that you loved, and did you ever get over it? You probably did, right? And that speaks volumes to how things can always get better, which is what I'd like to implore to Wizards fans today. And in a world without sports right now, there's really nothing that we can do besides fantasize about what the future holds for our beloved teams. So that's why I would like to talk to you today about why Wizards fans should be very optimistic about the future because of the return of John Wall, the firing of Ernie Grunfeld, and the rise to stardom of Bradley Beal. So the first and arguably most underrated reason why the Wizards fans should be very optimistic in the future is the return of 5-time All-Star and former number 1 overall pick John Wall. Wall, coming out of high school, had the most popular and still to this day probably the most viewed and most famous high school mixtapes of all time, right? So everybody knew this guy was going to be amazing. And then he went to college at the University of Kentucky, which at the time was the best program you could have gone to. Maybe Duke, but Kentucky was up there with John Calipari as the head coach. And he won 7, very, very, very impressive awards in his 1 year at Kentucky, including SEC Player of the Year, SEC Rookie of the Year, U.S. BWA Freshman of the Year. He was a consensus All-American first team, and, I think 3 or 4 other awards. So, the Wizards knew that John Wall had proven himself, and he was very much deserving of the number 1 overall pick. So when the Wizards were gifted that number 1 overall pick, they, of course, took John Wall. Now, Wall had 6-7 very successful seasons with the Wizards. He was a 5-time All-Star, as I said, and he led the Wizards to 3 division round exits in the playoffs that were all heartbreaking exits in a 4-year span from 2014 to 2017. But after the 2017 season, John Wall sort of fell off. He was open about how he lost his love for the game of basketball, and he was dealing with injuries that were nagging him and emotional distress that led him to argue with his teammates. Then Wall tore his Achilles in 2018, so he's been out of the league since 2018. He hasn't played in a year and a half. But head coach Scott Brooks and several physical trainers that work with him every single day are saying that they expect John Wall to come back better than ever. And as you guys can recall, he was very, very good. So the man who drafted Wall in 2010 is also the man who terrorized Wizards fans with his horrible decision-making as general manager. I'm talking about Ernie Grunfeld. Grunfeld was hired in 2003, and yes, he did draft John Wall, even though that was obvious. And he drafted Bradley Beal, who some of you might know, but I'll get to him later, with the 3rd pick in 2012. But most of his other draft picks were rather questionable. In 2006, he drafted Oleksiy Petrov, who played a season and a half with the Wizards and then retired from the NBA. In 2007 and 2008, he drafted Nick Young and JaVale McGee, who probably are considered, 2 of the most immature basketball players. At one point, JaVale McGee was, unanimously thought of the worst basketball player in the NBA. And then Grunfeld drafted Jan Vesely instead of Klay Thompson in 2011 when everybody thought we were going to draft Klay Thompson. And Jan Vesely at one point had more fouls than points in his career, and then after 3 seasons, after never averaging more than 5 points a game, was cut from the Wizards and didn't play in the NBA. This was the 6th overall pick, by the way, so very huge mistake. Now Grunfeld not only made draft errors all the time, but he also loved to trade away draft picks for short-term talent. In 2009, he traded away the 5th overall pick, which could have got Steph Curry, a number of players. And he got Randy Foye and Mike Miller, who were 2 role players that were older in age. And both those guys left after 40 games, and the Wizards won 20 games that season. In 2014 and 2015, 2016 and 2017, Grunfeld traded away all of the first rounders and got Markieff Morris and Bojan Bogdanovic, who helped for a little, but Bogdanovic was the same as Foy Miller and only played 40 games. Okay. And then in 2016, Grunfeld panicked after not getting all-star forwards Al Horford or Kevin Durant. So he used all the money that he had saved up to sign Ian Mahinmi, Andrew Nicholson, and Jason Smith for way too much money than they deserved, because none of those three players averaged more than 5 points a game in their season, and were getting paid $10+ million per year. And after that horrible error that didn't result in any championships, Grunfeld was fired, thank God. The reason it took Ernie so long to be fired is likely because of the success from his two successful draft picks, John Wall being one and Bradley Beal being the other. Bradley Beal, similarly to John Wall, was highly recruited out of high school. It was very clear that he was worthy of being a high draft pick in the NBA, but he was always sort of the Robin to John Wall's Batman. But after John Wall went down with injury, Beal has budded into a superstar and a two-time All-Star, and is averaging this season 30 points per game, which ranks, according to global NBA.com, as the 55th best mark per season in NBA history. And he's right in between Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and right slotted in there is Bradley Beal. So it's safe to say that Bradley Beal he's had a very successful career without John Wall, but John Wall is coming back. And yeah, I think it's maybe safe to say that when Wall comes back, he'll steal some of the thunder from Beal. Sorry, I'm actually supposed to. Okay. But Wall, after this injury, could be considered more of a passer, and that's what he was thought of at first, because he was considered top 5 assists. He was statistically was in the top 5 of assists in the past decade, and so it's fair to assume that he might be passing more to Beal. And so in conclusion, by understanding these three remarks, I do implore you to watch the Wizards. I do implore you to watch the Wizards play in the next, when the NBA does return, if it does return soon, to see the brand of basketball that they're going to bring. Because the Wizards were looking very promising, and I had never been more invested, and I loved them, and it was all ripped away from me by a series of unfortunate events. But those events have been fixed, and it's time for the world to understand that the Wizards are here to play. Thank you.